Okay, we are live now. I'm sorry. Dude, I went in and I thought I had to reset my laptop and it literally was just something in my settings turned off the audio and I'm angry because I really could have just fixed it like in 2 seconds, but I was just that thing of like when you just reset your laptop and like it usually solves most of the problems. Well, that's what I was banking on and that did not work. So we are now back. We're going to talk about Bukowski. Um, sorry for messing up that earlier. It's such a stupid thing. I'm so bad at like little inconveniences. I don't know how to deal with them. So thank you for being patient and we will we will get into it. Hold on, someone just sent me a text. Okay. I've been running a jujitsu class and nobody wants to show up this week, so I'm very disappointed. I almost threw these headphones out because I thought they weren't working. But yeah, we'll get into this. So this is Charles Bukowski is like a very interesting figure because he sort of reminds me of Walt Whitman in the fact that he talks about like the mundaneness of things and like somewhat somewhat the beauty in that. And to me that really sticks out and to me that's really interesting. Why is there no this is such a hold on. It's like so many stupid errors today for like no reason. So I made a thumbnail just for this stream and it's not didn't save. Just give me a second. Okay. And of course it's not gonna load. But all right, well sorry. I it's this is just like pissing me off all these little things that are just going wrong. I just have to get going. Otherwise I'm just gonna keep making myself annoyed. All right.
We all know
This is Mark Manson. I'm pretty sure he wrote some self-help book. I don't know what the title of it is. We can look it up later, and maybe we can go read it later. But this seems to be a good video. I tried to start playing this earlier, and it looks very well edited, very well done, much better than anything I can do. So yeah, if you enjoy the video, check this guy's channel out. We might check out some more stuff by him.
the world famous success stories, the titans of history. We've
Let me know if it's too loud.
all heard their advice and taken the lessons from their lives. But what about the lowlifes? What about the degenerates? Nobody ever talks about what we can learn from them. And
And there's something really interesting in like stories about people. What I mean by this is like you think of like a Arthurian legend or like Lord of the Rings, which is about like heroes and princes and kings and people with royal blood, and then it's not really about everyday people. It's not really about everyday lives. It's about these grand feats, these grand tasks, and these things that are so removed from us all. But then there's the artists like James Joyce or Walt Whitman or Charles Bukowski who talk about the mundaneness of things, who talk about the everyday lifeness of things, and somewhat explore that experience. And it's really interesting because you read Ulysses and it more or less mythologizes the everyday life of Dubliners. Essentially, if you read Ulysses, that in the experience of these everyday citizens and Dubliners, you can learn all that needs to be learned about humanity. That's really the interesting aspect of it. It's a lot more complicated when you go to read it, but that's essentially what Joyce attempts to create with the work.
until now, Charles Bukowski was an alcoholic, a gambler, a shameless womanizer, a cheapskate, a deadbeat, and on his worst days, a poet. He
He sounds like somebody that'd be fun to hang out with.
He
But
is, in many ways, the last person you would expect to find wisdom or life advice, which is why he's the perfect person to look for wisdom and life advice.
See this fucking thing? That's where it's done.
Bukowski wanted
let me just make sure I'm not getting any warnings. Nope, I'm good so far. Whenever there's music playing, I always get scared because there's like a high chance that I'm gonna get annoying messages later. But yeah,
to be a writer, but for decades his work was rejected by almost every magazine, newspaper, journal, agent, and publisher. His work was horrible, they said. Crude, disgusting.
you got arrested? What did you get arrested for? What? You're literally turning into the next Christina. You know that, right?
Depraved. And as the stack of rejection notes piled up, the weight of his failures pushed him deep into an alcohol-fueled depression that followed him for most of his life.
And it makes sense why Bukowski is rejected because his works aren't necessarily like they're not pretentious in any way. They're in fact he's very humble. He's very realistic. He's very raw. He's very brutal. He talks about life as most people see it, and he doesn't try to mythologize it. He doesn't try to make it in some grand metaphor, make it into some grand experience. He talks about things as they are. And there's something so beautiful in this rawness, but it's also very confronting. And there's a whole lot of people that like to bury their head in the sand. There's a whole lot of people that don't like to actually experience life and instead like to kind of believe in something that isn't real, believe in something that isn't actually there. They believe in the system, they believe in ideals, they believe in groups, they believe in leaders, and to me it seems doesn't seem like Bukowski believes in anything.
Bukowski had a day job as a letter filer at the post office. He got paid.
You got arrested for going over the speed limit? What'd you do? Did you resist arrest or something? Well, how'd you get arrested for speeding? What? Should I just look up like body cam footage from whatever country you live in? Find you? You weren't properly arrested. They brought you to the court. Why'd they bring you to the court just over speeding? Do you not have a license or something? That's weird.
Shit money and spent most of it on booze. He gambled away the rest at the racetrack. At night, he would drink alone and sometimes hammer out poetry on his beat-up old typewriter. 30 years went by like this.
The funniest thing is in post office, he like makes himself out to be a successful gambler, and like I wonder how much of that is true and how much of that is like him like because like he seems pretty like honest with things, and a lot of the stories he tells, you can tell there's a layer of truth in it. Some of them are obviously too out there, some of them are obviously too weird, but you could tell he at least heard the story or something similar happened to him. But I wonder if the only part he embellished was his gambling skills.
Most of it a
That's what I
meaningless
would do.
blur of alcohol, drugs, gambling, and prostitutes. When Bukowski was 50, after a lifetime of failure and self-loathing, an editor at a small independent publishing house took a strange interest in him. Bukowski wrote back to the editor, "I have one of two choices. Stay in the post office and go crazy, or stay out here and play at writer and starve. I have decided to starve."
Damn. That's a that's a really interesting way of thinking about it because you can always you can always go one of two ways. You can take the safe route. You can always, do what you were told to do, and your whole life you'll have never known. Your whole life you will look back at that moment when you could have taken that chance but you didn't, and now you don't even know if you were good enough. And to me that's like one of I wouldn't say I'm really afraid of things, but that's like really a fear of mine that, I wouldn't have given it my all. That looking back, there was more I could have done. Looking back, whatever life I wished to live, I was only separated by the amount of effort I gave, and I didn't give enough effort. And there's something very, very real in that. And there's something that we all experience in that we're not always living the life that we want to. not always aligning ourselves with what we want to. We're following someone else's path. We're following someone else's guide of what a good life is, or we're listening to somebody else of what we should do when really you need to somewhat listen to your own intuition.
Upon signing the contract, Bukowski wrote his first novel in 3 weeks. It was simply called
This is the first thing I read by Bukowski. Actually, I've read some of his poetry, which I enjoy as well. But this is an interesting work because it's essentially like, obviously because Bukowski worked at the post office most of his life, but it's like a collection of like, sometimes the chapters are like an entire page, sometimes they're not. And it's essentially like the rundown of day after day, and then it skips some time, and it kind of gives you a complete full circle experience of his life working at the post office. And the names, the dates, all of the things, they might not be 100% accurate, but you can certainly see his experience bleed out into it, and you can certainly see how he kind of grew old at the post office and kind of grew disillusioned and kind of gave up on a lot of his hopes and dreams and a lot of his idealistic way of looking at the world.
Post Office. In the dedication, he wrote, dedicated to nobody.
We're all gonna die.
That's the most Bukowski thing ever.
All of us. What a circus. That alone should make us love each other, but it doesn't. We're terrorized and flattened by trivialities.
Did he go postal? He did not go postal. You missed it. He said, if I stay at the post office, I'll go crazy. If I decide to write, then I'll starve, and I decide to starve. So he chose the better way. He chose the way where he didn't go crazy. That's so weird to me. Like, I've heard a lot of that recently. Like, I've heard several people like say that saying. That must have been before my time because I had never heard of going postal. I didn't know that was a real thing. I just thought that was just a saying. But like recently I've learned where that comes from, and that's the craziest. It blows my mind. It makes no sense at all. Like, what is that? But it's like that episode of Seinfeld where Newman, is it Kramer or Jerry that asks Newman, why do mailmen go crazy? And he and he gives like this deranged look. He's like, it's because the mail never stops. That Newman is the best character in all of Seinfeld. Please fight me on that. That's him and George just always make me laugh.
We're eaten up like nothing.
Bukowski
It's like that we're eaten up by nothing. It reminds me a lot of that Dostoevsky quote. Your greatest sin is that you have betrayed and destroyed yourself for absolutely nothing. Every time I hear that quote, it just like shakes me to my core because it's essentially about what our daily decisions sacrifice, what our daily um actions kind of mean in terms of the bigger picture of our soul. The post office would make Sisyphus smile. It certainly would. I don't know if this is just like in my town or just in my state, but the post office got these new vehicles and they look so stupid. Like whatever Elon was trying to do with Doge, investigate the post office because that seems to be like the biggest waste of money I've ever seen. These cars literally look like they look like futuristic cop cars from like a dystopian society. And I promise you, like whatever fuel efficiency or whatever, I'm sure they're electronic. They just look so dumb and like I don't know how to describe it.
would make it as a novelist and a poet. He would go on and publish 6 novels and hundreds of poems, selling over 2 million copies of his books.
I started to discover a new kind of writing that had a directness.
So this is where you write?
This is where I fuck my soul.
Stories like Bukowski's are the bread and butter of our cultural narrative. Bukowski's life embodies the American dream. A man fights
Like crashing out for having coffee thrown on you. Yeah, yeah. Did someone throw coffee on you or something? Is that what you're trying to say? Look at these things. They're so. Am I blocking it? Hold on. These things are so dumb looking. I promise you, this is such a waste of money. Like, uh, the fact that we pay taxes just for these stupid ass cars, like, it's such an insult. They all did. It's like, how much money do you think was spent on this? Like, look at this idiot. Like, this guy, like, making a video about, oh, look how nice these things are. Like, how much of an idiot do you have to be to? Anyway, I feel like I'm just gonna rant about how stupid these cars look for the rest of the stream if I keep
For
going.
what he
So,
wants, never gives up, and eventually achieves his wildest dreams. It's practically a movie waiting to happen. It is then strange that on Bukowski's tombstone, the epitaph reads, "Don't try."
and there's something beautiful in this. And before he explains it, I'm going to explain it myself so that I get the first word and I look smarter than him, even though he has more subscribers than I will ever have. But, I'm going to get this one moral victory. The old man cars look better. And there's certain, like, dude, the dumbest thing about electric cars is that the amount of emissions to produce an electric car, you're better off to just use an old car until it runs into the ground. It's like the most ridiculous thing ever. I hate all this like stupid like shallow thinking about like saving the environment. Because even if you're going to save the environment, there's better ways of doing it than getting all these new things. Because these cars immediately lose their value. They need to have the battery replaced every so often. It's so dumb. But essentially, the idea of don't try is a very important one. And what it means by don't try is don't do anything that feels like work. And this is something so counter to our entire culture, our entire society, our entire way of upbringing that me saying this, you might be like, oh, this guy. No, I'm not saying don't work. Don't go out into the world and do things. Don't toil. Don't struggle. No, what I'm saying is do something that doesn't feel difficult. Do something that you love. Give yourself to something that you can devote yourself to and you're inspired by. And again, it's impossible to do in your entire daily existence unless you're some enlightened master, unless you're Gurdjieff, unless you're Osho. I don't know who you are, but essentially, what I want you to start understanding is that we all have things in life that we are driven by. We all have things in life that we love. But how often do we spend the necessary amount of time on those things? You know, even me, like I love writing, but I haven't written in a few days. And it's like, no matter how long I write, I can keep writing. No matter what time of night it is, I can keep writing. I can keep reading. I can keep studying. I can keep learning. Like these are things that drive me, and it's not work to me. It's fun to me. And it's sort of that Taoist idea of Wu Wei, effortless action, inspired action. And it's doing the things on a daily basis that recharge us, that make life worth living. It's the myth of Sisyphus. You must imagine Sisyphus smiling. You must imagine that there's little moments of joy in all the monotony that make it all worth it.
See, despite the book sales and the fame, Bukowski was a loser, and he was very aware of it.
No way you just said Genghis Khan had the best plan for saving the environment. I just saw that. That's the craziest thing to me is that like people talk about Genghis Khan and like say positive things about him. It's like, dude, this is one of like the worst people in history. Like you could say like he was a good like strategic person, but like look back on like even dictators from like 100 years ago, and if you say that stuff about them, like you would feel weird about it. Yet Genghis Khan is like worse than most of them, probably worse than all of them. And it's like nobody even bats an eye when you're like, yeah, this guy, this guy, this guy. Like, you know what I mean? It's like fishing. It's all about the things, including the fish, even when you don't catch any. Yes, exactly. That's a perfect way of putting it. And the other thing about this is it's not the end goal that makes it worth it. It isn't. I promise you, what would mean more? If you won the lottery in a year, or if in a year you reached your goal and made that same amount of money? So whether it's a business, whether it's becoming a pro athlete, whether it's becoming an author and your book does really like whatever it is, imagine you make $1 million from the lottery, $1 million from your goal. What would feel better? It's the exact same outcome, but what would feel better? And obviously, you working towards something greater, obviously, you working towards something that fulfills you will always be better. And we oftentimes like to separate ourselves from the process. We like to separate ourselves from the moment. We like to forget that we actually enjoy what we're doing and we only think about the outcome. We only think about the end goal. The whole point of the process is the process. The people that go the farthest in any field is the person that loves doing the work, the person that is inspired by the work, the person that enjoys the setbacks, that enjoys the failure, that enjoys getting better and better and better and better. It's not the person that's obsessed with the outcome. GSP is a really good example of this. George St. Pierre, he would always say he hates fighting, but he loves training. Fighting is the easiest part because fighting, if you're a really good fighter, you win the fight, you get millions of dollars, you get all the fame, all of the accolades. People are, glazing you after the fight about how good your performance was, this and that. George St. Pierre hated all of that. He loved training. He loved getting better. That's why he was such a good fighter because to him, the best part was learning. The best part was becoming better. The best part was perfecting his craft. That's the important aspect of things. But we focus so much on the end goal. Stop worrying about the end goal and worry about what you're doing. Enjoy what you're doing. That's really the aspect of life that we need to regain because that's what we were able to do as a kid. Think about when you were a kid and you could go play outside, throw the football for hours upon hours upon hours. You weren't doing anything for an end goal. You were doing it to have fun. And we've somewhat forgot this. We somewhat forgot that there's this need to actually enjoy life. Like it sounds so weird to say, but like it's almost bred out of us by the time we're an adult. And I'm not saying that there's no necessity, like if you have people that rely on you and this, okay, cool. But there's also a necessity for you to somewhat enjoy life. There's a necessity for you to not take things so seriously. I've heard it said you can't compete with somebody that's having fun. That is a great way of saying it. I I I really like that. Money earned is worth 10 times money given. For sure, for sure.
His success stemmed not from his determination to be a winner, but from the fact that he knew he was a loser, accepted it, and wrote about it shamelessly. He never tried to be anything other than what he was.
And there's something really beautiful in that you have this self-acceptance, you have this self-understanding because, essentially all outward striving, we're getting like, I don't know if necessarily this is the point he's making, but anything you try to do in this world is really for the sake of people telling you that you're good. And then finally you can look in the mirror and tell yourself, I'm good enough to accept myself. That's the need to get a fancy car. That's the need to get a fancy house. That's a need to get anything above your bare minimum sustenance. And now that you know this fact, now it's kind of a hollow existence to go pursue things and chase things and do all these things. You're not looking for a certain thing, you're looking for self-acceptance. If things come to you, then good. But those shouldn't be what you aim for. What you aim for should be the experience. Should be the things the experiences that you collect along the way, the trials and tribulations that you overcome, the person that you become. That should mean more to you than anything else.
This is the first big lesson from Bukowski's life. Trying sounds like you're doing something. If you say, I'm trying to work on this or I'm trying to be more like that, it sounds to people like you're putting lots of effort in, that you have good intentions. But what Bukowski points out to us is that trying is often the most subtle form of avoiding. The genius
Trying is often the most subtle form of avoiding. That's a really good way of putting it. That is a really good way of putting it. There's a Seneca quote that I say all the time, but we suffer more in our own minds than we do in reality. And what that means is we always build things up in our head to be so much scarier than they ever could be. I use this example all the time because it's a really easy one that we've all kind of experienced because we all know somebody that says they're going to do something and they never do it. How many people do you know that say, "Oh, I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start doing that." And yet it's years later and they're in the exact same position. And I can tell you exactly what that is. I can tell you exactly why they haven't done what they said they were going to do. It's because they're looking at the path in front of them and thinking they have to take 1,000 steps at a time instead of just placing one foot in front of the other. That's what that is. And what Bukowski's saying here is that when you say you're trying to do something, when you're saying you're doing this or that, you're procrastinating. You have to put one foot forward so that you can put the next foot forward, and then the next one, and then the next one. And most of us look at the end stage. Most of us look at the mountaintop and say, well, it's so scary. Well, yeah, you're not going to be able to get there right away. You're not going to be able to do step 1,000 if you haven't done the previous 999 steps. But you can only do one step at a time and it gets easier. The hardest step is always the first one. The easiest is always the last. And yet we're only separated by so many steps. And we're not willing to take the first one.
Genius in Bukowski's work, then, is not in overcoming unbelievable odds or developing himself into a shining literary light. It was the opposite. It was his simple ability to be completely, unflinchingly honest with himself, especially the worst parts of himself, and to share his.
And there's something very important with that is that when you can be honest with yourself and when you know who you really are, then you're not lying to yourself. And you have to somewhat have an observation of your complete self, good, bad, indifferent, all the qualities that you have, so that you can temper them, so that you can put them to something productive. This is a big part of Jungian psychology that you have to be introspective about yourself so that you can know in what direction you have to improve. You have anger issues. How could you use this emotion for the better? What are things that constantly make you overreact? What are situations where you were in the wrong, but you were unwilling to admit them? What are your tendencies in certain situations? Do you shut down when there's a difficult conversation? Like understanding yourself fully is the path to salvation. That is really the path to saving your life, the path to living a good life, to living a good existence, an existence that is bearable instead of one that is terrifying and you will forever feel like you are lost.
His failings without hesitation or doubt. This is the real story of Bukowski's success, his comfort with himself as a failure. Bukowski didn't give a fuck about success. He didn't give a fuck what you or I thought about him. Even after his fame, he still showed up to poetry readings hammered and verbally abused people in his audience.
Watch it, man.
If I ever get to any sort of fame, I'm gonna do that. That's it's actually so funny.
Take you like a motherfucker.
One more beer, I'll take you all of you.
He still exposed himself in public and got arrested.
He's unzipped himself. It's just dangling there, and he's running up and down the street. People are screaming and horrified.
It's like Archimedes when he discovered the Archimedes principle. Essentially, there's this very like famous concept that we all know, and it's how do we measure volume? And we measure volume by, well, the easiest way. Now I'm sure there's imaging and 3D modeling and all sorts of stuff like that where it's just a computer does it. But before that, the easiest way to measure volume was to place something in water and see how much water was displaced. And this was discovered by Archimedes, and he discovered it by sitting in a bathtub. And the moment he discovered it, he began to run naked throughout the town screaming, Eureka. Well, it was obviously whatever it is in Greek, whatever I found it in Greek is, but maybe that is it. But yeah, he was completely naked and everyone thought he was a madman, but he made one of the greatest discoveries ever. It is Eureka.
They're covering their children's eyes. Call the police.
And tried to sleep with every woman he met. Fame and success did not make Bukowski a good person, nor was it by becoming a good person that he became famous and successful. See, growth and success often occur together. but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the same thing. And this is the second lesson of Bukowski's life, that success isn't a product of getting everything right. It's often the product of being comfortable with being wrong.
It's often the product being comfortable with being wrong. That's an interesting way of putting it. I hate when it does that.
If you're gonna try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start.
If you're gonna try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. That's a beautiful way of putting it because think of how many people do things half-ass. Think of how many people have some sort of goal or some sort of dream or some sort of aspiration, and they have all sorts of excuses. They have all sorts of copes. They have all sorts of safety plans or backup plans. And it's like the art of war says, like, or no, the art of war actually says the opposite. Don't fight an enemy on death ground, but it's you have to put yourself on death ground so that your back's up against the wall and you have to fight harder than you ever imagined you could. It's in those moments where we don't know what else we can do, where we have to give it our all, where we can shine the brightest. And there's something really beautiful in this sentiment, and there's something really fundamental in this sentiment that we all need to start somewhat understanding because you're either going to live a life that is hollow, that is empty, where you're living for somebody else, or you're going to accept yourself for who you are and try to live as yourself in this world authentically. It's as Emerson said, to be yourself in a world that seeks conformity is the greatest of achievements.
This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, maybe even your mind. It could mean not eating for 3 or 4 days. It could mean derision. It could mean mockery, isolation. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you.
Isolation is a gift. That's interesting because there's a lot of people that aren't okay with being alone. There's a lot of people that can't handle silence. Have you ever been in a room with somebody and there's nothing to say, but they still try to talk to you? I've been guilty of this myself. This is something I couldn't deal with silence when I was a lot younger. But it's something I've gained a much more appreciation for as I've gotten older and as I've understood that most of your life is going to be in silence. Most of your life, you're not going to be talking to people. You're going to be doing things. You're going to spend time alone. And there's a necessity to be okay with this. There's a necessity to enjoy both the silence and both the crowds. I'm too much of I enjoy silence. I'm too much of I enjoy being to myself and I enjoy being with my own thoughts.
Really want to do it, and you'll do it, despite rejection and the worst odds. And it will be better than anything else you can imagine. If you're gonna try, go all the way. There's
I love that saying. If you're gonna try, go all the way.
no other feeling like that. You'll be alone with the gods, and the nights will flame with fire. You'll ride life straight to perfect laughter. It's the only good fight there is.
In my opinion, the honesty in Bukowski's writing, his fears, failures, regret, self-destruction, emotional dysfunction, it is unparalleled.
There's no cope about Bukowski when he's wrong. He admits when he's wrong. He admits when he's, you know, not doing something that's good. He's honest about it. He doesn't make any excuses. He doesn't judge himself. He just is. And it's so refreshing because we live in a day and age where nothing is your fault, where we can push off the blame to everyone else. And there's something so profound in absolute acceptance. There's a there's this part of the Book of Mere Dad, which basically says that like to sin is to not forgive yourself. To sin is to hide something from yourself and God. And what this means is that you can't move forward past a misstep or a mistake. That's the original word of sin, and we put such a connotation on it. But you can't move past a mistake. You can't move past something bad if you haven't accepted it. Because if you don't accept it, then you harbor emotion, you harbor sentiment, you actively judge yourself and shame yourself, and the more shame you feel for your past, the more you're bringing that past into the present. It's like you ever talk to somebody after a breakup and it's years later and they're still like living their life based off that other person. They're still talking about that other person. They're still in some way trying to prove to them that you're good enough, or that, I don't need you, that I won, that I'm better off without you. Like, it's very weird. Like, the only way to get revenge on somebody is to forgive them and forget them because they no longer hold any attention in your brain. They no longer have any effect on you. And there's something very real in that. And this is essentially what Bukowski's doing when he's being honest with you, is that he's understanding where he falls short, so that he doesn't. I don't know if he's getting some sort of retribution from it. I don't know if he's guiding himself in a better direction, but there's something so refreshing about this honesty.
He will tell you the best and worst of himself without flinching, without shifting his eyes or even muttering a sorry about that as an afterthought. He wrote about both shame and pride without qualification. And what Bukowski understood, which most people don't, is that the best things in life can sometimes be ugly. Life is messy, and we're all screwed up in our own special snowflake kind of way. He never understood the baby boomer obsession with peace and happiness and the idealism that came along with it. He understood that you don't get one side of life without the other. You don't get love without the heartache.
Khalil Gibran said it best: every sorrow deepens your joy. Every time you experience pain, it allows you to experience pleasure that much more.
You don't get greatness without pain. You don't get meaning without sacrifice. And this is the third life lesson that I take from Bukowski. See, in our minds, we like to believe that happiness and success and confidence and good relationships, that these things all go hand in hand together all the time. And the truth is, doing those big goals that feel meaningful requires us to feel some degree of pain and sacrifice.
Big goals that feel meaningful require pain and sacrifice. It's that saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. That anything worthwhile in this world is going to cost you something. You get a promotion at work, you get paid a whole lot more. Well, that means you have way more responsibilities and your ass is on the line when something goes wrong. It's just a simple reality of life, is that everything has trade-offs. There's no such thing as solutions, only trade-offs, as Thomas Sowell says. And I think there's something very fundamental to life with that there's always this give and take. There's always this push and pull. There's some cosmic force that doesn't give you anything for free. That there's always some sort of change. Even if you fundamentally change your life, you have become a different person. Your life becomes exponentially better, and all the things that you once were falling victim to, you no longer fall victim to, and your life is perfect. Well, you're going to lose that old part of yourself. You're going to lose those old friends because you don't resonate with them anymore. And it's just, there's no becoming something else with staying who you currently are. It's like, the best analogy is the pearl of great price. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who finds a pearl of great price, who gives up all that he owns in order to obtain this pearl. And essentially what the Bible is telling you is that to find heaven, you must give up all that makes you you. You must sacrifice everything that you know, everything that you love, in order to attain this height, this salvation, this acceptance of God. But it's the same thing with any idealized state. It's the same thing with any goal. It's the same thing with any pursuit, is that you're going to have to suffer. You're going to have to lose yourself in order to find yourself. You're going to have to become something completely new and something fundamentally different from what you already are to find what you're looking for.
Because what I love about Bukowski is the implicit understanding that finding purpose and meaning is not a fucking 5-day spa retreat. It's not euphoric or joyous. It's not an epiphany in a meditation circle or found.
Even like Gurdjieff's in Gurdjieff's system, it's like this constant insistence that it's a long, hard, arduous process that is going to be painstakingly difficult in order for you to discover what you're looking for.
Than a pill or a drug. Finding purpose in your life is a trial by fire process. You don't simply wake up one day and become happy doing one thing forever and ever. Like death, a purposeful life is a constant work in progress. You must do something, pay attention to how it feels, then adjust, and then do something else. Nobody gets it right on the first try or the 10th or sometimes even the 200th.
If you got it right on the first try, that it would be meaningless. If everything good came to you easy, it wouldn't be so good because eventually it would feel hollow, it would feel empty. It's the fact that we fail, it's the fact that we fall short that makes any accomplishment meaningful.
And in many cases, the only way you know it's meaningful is because you were called to suffer for it. Suffer deeply for it. That hurt. This is real. This is what it's actually like in the trenches of day-to-day adult life. And Bukowski, he lived his life on the front lines.
Too often, the people complain that they have done nothing with their lives, and then they wait for somebody to tell them that this isn't so. But they have it right. They've done nothing. Shown no courage. No inventiveness. They did what they were told to do. They had no resistance, no thoughts of their own.
And there's something so honest about this because I'm sure in a certain way that Bukowski's describing himself. And we all feel this way in a certain way that no matter what we do, it's not for anything. No matter what we do, it's impossible to leave an impact that will last more than a few generations. And I feel like this is something that we just have to come to grips with. But it's there's something tied in with mortality with this because think about it this way. How can we live forever? Well, you can find the philosopher's stone, become a more alchemist, or much more easily you can become famous and successful and change the world and do all these things. And then there'll be statues of you and people will remember you, but that's not even real. Think of people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates. Like these people are so sad to me because they have everything that you could ever ask for, yet they need more. Yet they need to start getting their hands into things that really don't concern them. They need to extend their legacy. They need to extend their power, extend their influence. And all of this is to come to grips with the fact that they're going to die. Come to grips with the fact that, in a few hundred years, they'll all be afterthoughts. Like, can you name more than a handful of people that lived 2 centuries ago, 3 centuries ago, four, 5, 10, 20, 30, 1,000? You know what I mean? Like, at a certain point, everyone that you ever know, every idea that you've ever stumbled upon will all be forgotten. And there's this weird insistence that we need to leave our mark, but I don't get it. It's so kind of it's just weird to me. And once you free yourself from this need to like leave a mark, then there's no pressure. And life without pressure is fun. I'm somebody that really, really does bad when the lights are the brightest. When I'm in my own head, when I'm telling myself this is so important, this is so important. So the more I can remind myself of how little these things matter and how I'm mentored to find some sort of purpose, some sort of meaning, some sort of enjoyment out of life, then it allows me to be more playful. It allows me to be more creative. It allows me to be more myself, put in the work without being so dependent on the results. And I've really found a lot of success through doing that.
Don't try. Instead, live, fight, love, mourn, fuck, fail. Bukowski understood that trying was a cheap replacement for
What
living.
is this edit?
Trying it's a weasel word. It's a subtle way of getting out of responsibility for one's desires and one's failures. Bukowski understood that ultimately,
What is this? Dude, never sign up for any stock photos because you're gonna get edited into something like this.
responsibility for one's desires and one's failures. Bukowski understood that ultimately the most important choices in life don't actually feel like a choice. They
Imagine like making like probably like $50 to be in some stock photo, and then people are just putting that kind of stuff on your
feel as though they've been chosen
video.
for us.
Poetry doesn't pay anything, but it's a passionate, selfish, nice form where you can scream a little bit. I guess I needed to scream a little bit.
The sense of purpose is not found in something cool and neat to show off to the other kids. It's feeling called to do something even when you sometimes wish you didn't have to.
There's this Kafka story, A Hunger Artist, and I'm gonna spoil it. It's been 100 years. If you haven't read it up to now, then you're really missing out. But you probably won't get this on the first reading either. But wow, I'm gonna have to summarize the whole story to get to this point. So Kafka has this story. It's called A Hunger Artist, and it's about this man who puts on a show for the public. And his show is he sits in a cage and he fasts for days upon days upon days. And at first, it's a marvel. At first, people really appreciate it. Slowly over time, it becomes less and less popular, and eventually, he ends up signing with a circus, and he's in the corner of a cage, and they forget about him. And he's finally found, and in his dying breaths, he admits that he didn't enjoy being a hunger artist, but he did it because he had to. And to me, what this is representative of is that Kafka didn't want to write, but he had to. Kafka didn't want to have to put his pain in his art, his lack of acceptance for himself into his writing, his horrific childhood and his experience in the world into these very bleak and very absurdist tales, but he had to because there was no other way to find this in his everyday life. And it's such a fascinating concept when you really analyze art and you can learn so much about the person through the way they express themselves, the medium in which they use, the characters in which they write, the people in which they describe, the world in which they create through their given art form.
It is something that feels like an inevitability, like it was born for you and into you, and whatever it is, you cannot survive long without it coming out of you. Bukowski once said, "Find what you love and let it kill you." Well, your purpose is your preferred.
Find what you love and let it kill you. I think I posted this quote the other day, and there's something so profound in this because most of our lives are spent doing things that we don't enjoy, but what other people tell us to do. And the sad reality is like we've all been told to go to school, we've all been told to do a set action that will make you successful, but it really only works out for a handful of people. And we would be so much happier if we just followed our own heart, followed our own tuition, followed our own way of doing things, but instead we form to this imaginary archetype, this imaginary successful person that if we are like this person, then we'll be happy. But the truth is, we'll never succeed to be that imaginary successful person, that imaginary person that has it all figured out. That person doesn't exist. It's just an amalgamation of what society puts onto a set of actions that will reward you. And it's very weird that we all fall victim to the same archetype, this all kind of together person that is perfect, that enjoys everything, that has it all, that never struggles. And it's like it's just so funny that we like denounce fairy tales and say, oh, that's child stuff, but then we live our lives in pursuit of this almost fairy tale like archetype.
Vehicle towards death, and you're more than happy to let it take you there.
Okay, that was a pretty good video. Um, I have a few more Bukowski videos, and then I also have this Schopenhauer video. This guy I really like.
Must feel good at the approach of death.
Why? You have a nice wife.
All that's okay. But you see, as you live many years, things take on a repeat. Is that ended? Are you ended?
No, it's okay.
Things take on a repeat. You understand?
And there's something interesting in this because something Musashi says that has always stuck with me is that once you know the way, you see it in all things. And there's only so many ways life can turn out. There's only so many ways in which you can react. There's only so many types of people that you can interact with. I think Gurdjieff said there's like seven archetypes, and you can't really describe them, but it makes so much sense that you meet the same kind of people time and time again. You see the same kind of look on people time and time again, and there's just something about life that is infinite but yet finite. It's a very weird concept to explain, but I know what he's trying to say.
Stan, you keep seeing the same thing over and over again. The same substance, the same action, the same reaction. So you get a little.
The more you like remove yourself from like politics, the more you just see it's all the same outrage cycles. It's the same, oh, the midterms are coming up, so let's get people riled up about a certain thing, and then, we'll forget about politics for a little bit, and then the presidential election will come up, and then after that, people will forget about it. And it's all these like ebbs and flows and rising waves, and it's a really interesting thing to observe as an outsider because the more I like retreat into myself, the more I'm able to observe these things and not partake in them and not fall victim to the whims of the crowd and the collective crowd movements, as Gustave Le Bon would say.
Bit tired of life. So as death comes, you almost say, okay, baby, it's time. Let's
What's up,
do it.
Loyal? How's everything?
So I know I have very little fear of death. In fact, I almost welcome it.
And this is a very so there's this weird conception with death that we should be afraid of it. And I wish I could remember who said this. It's either Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, or Plato. I can't remember who though. But basically, what they said and what really struck me is that we don't know what death is. And so we don't know what death is. Why are we afraid of death? It was Seneca. That's what it was Seneca. I'm remembering now. And we don't live our life in X amount of ways out of fear of death. We don't do this because it would in some way hinder our life. We don't do this or this or this or this. And it's like the only thing that really gives our life meaning is death. So to be afraid of death is to be afraid of life. Because if you're afraid of death, then you're going to shut yourself inside. I don't know if anybody's a germaphobe. I am not, but like, have you ever seen like a germaphobe where they're like wash their hands and they won't touch things or they won't do certain things or they have all these weird mannerisms. And what I've noticed is germaphobes are the most sick people. And it's the same thing with the people that are the most afraid of death. So the people that are most afraid of death live the safest lives and the most boring lives and the worst lives. And that the people that fear death the least live their life to the fullest the most. And obviously there's extremes. Evil Knievel is not a good example, but somebody that has a healthy respect for death and a healthy respect for life is something that we should aspire to be like.
Did you ever read Malcolm Lowry's Under the Volcano?
Yeah, I did, and I yawned myself to shit.
Why?
Why? Because, like any other writer, there's no pace, there's no quickness in his lines. There's no life, there's no sunlight. When you write, your words must go like this. Bim, 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 bim. Each
That's the good thing about Bukowski too, is he doesn't sugarcoat things. He's not Charles Dickens. He doesn't go into enormous details about the smallest minute things, and it can be interesting. It can be good, but I also enjoy the people that seemingly write with fire. Nietzsche, most of his greatest works are aphorisms, short little paragraphs that in the course of maybe 100 words change your entire way of looking at the world. Poetry like William Blake's, where work like The Marriage of Heaven and Hell is 15, 20 pages, but has had a lasting impact on me since I've read it. Um, Give me a second, I'll be right back. All right. Thanks for being patient.
Each line must be full of a delicious little juice, flavor. They must be full of power. They must make you like to turn a page. Bim, bim, bim. What these guys do, they say, well, in blah, 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 da, 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 there was a porch chair. The flies were walking around. You see, they're too leisurely.
I see why people appreciate that style of writing. They really give you a clear picture. I don't enjoy that, and I'm with Bukowski here. I want you to get to the point. I want you to speak about things that are important. I don't need the minute details unless they are striking, unless they are for a purpose. Like, why am I sitting here reading something when I could read something that is much more profound? And really that was in the beginning why I wasn't reading fiction, because I was like, I don't really care that much of a story. Like, the plot points aren't that important. But then I was starting to discover fiction that was more so meaningful and more impactful and more inspiring than anything else I've ever studied.
They're setting up the scene for the grand emotion, and when they get to the grand emotion, there isn't any. This is a different age. It's the atomic age. Each line must have its own power, its own feeling, its own juice, its own flavor. Writing must never be boring. It must not bore the reader, the writer. It must not bore anybody. You have to have juice in each line, don't you see? You don't.
And this is probably more, I mean, Bukowski died in 97, but I'm assuming he would say even more now than ever because our attention spans have become so destroyed because we're unable to hold a thought for more than seemingly 5 seconds nowadays about how you need to keep the reader on the edge of their seat. You need to constantly be hitting all emotions all at once. I think the best example of somebody that can do that is Khalil Gibran. I read Khalil Gibran and I want to cry tears of joy and tears of sadness all at the same time. And it's what he's speaking about is something only a handful of authors could ever do. And when it's well done, it's tremendous.
You don't believe me, but I'm trying to tell you. I get so. Writers put me to sleep. They always did. They always will. Each line must be an entity unto itself, but must carry its own, like a voltage juice. You can't say, Mrs. McGillicuddy was sitting in her chair. It was 3:30 p.m. on a southern morning in Georgia. Mr. McGillicuddy.
Each line must be able to live on its own. Wow, that's such a great way to describe it. And I don't know how many of you write. I wouldn't say I do this intentionally when I write, but like I try to. A lot of what I write is like it's called poetic prose, and I don't do this intentionally, but a lot of what I write should be individual epitaphs, individual sort of quotes or phrases that you can somewhat gain inspiration from in each line. I don't know, that's what I like to read. I really like to read Blake or Gibran or Bukowski. This is very Chuck Palin Palahniuk. I never had I don't know how to say his last name. I know who you're talking. The guy that wrote Fight Club, Minimalist. Is that what it's called?
McGillicuddy was, this is all, it's already dead, you see. You must say, the thing.
But he died from alcohol. You're not afraid of...
Oh, you thinking of Faulkner?
No,
He was
I
one
know.
of the worst practitioners
Of course, but now I'm talking about Lowry. He died from alcohol. You're
Oh,
not afraid
Lowry.
of...
Oh, yeah. Well, it's nice to die of alcoholism. It's very glorious.
There's that there's the Norm Macdonald joke, and he's it's so funny. And it's like it's honestly sad looking back too, because he's like, yeah, my uncle told me he's an alcoholic. That's one of the better diseases to have, you know. You know, this guy over here says he's dying of cancer, you know. That sounds pretty bad, but this guy over here, he likes to drink a lot, maybe a little too much. I know I butchered the line, but it's just such a funny thought that like if there was one way to go out, at least you'd have a little bit of fun. But again, I'm not. I feel like people are gonna take that the wrong way, but there's something very funny in what he's saying.
But if you write dull shit, it doesn't do any good what you die from. You see? Alcohol is not a great thing. Because you die from alcohol doesn't mean you're any good. You got to leave some words behind. He died swallowing his own vomit. Great. Now, he's not even a professional drunk.
What? Like, what did this guy do to him?
When I really have a big drunk, I put my head on the side of the mattress and let it like this. So if I vomit, it's just gonna go to the floor. This man's not even a fucking professional drunk.
I 100% believe him. That's why I'm laughing so
Besides
hard.
that, it's bad, dull writing. Next question. For Christ's sake, do you have another question? Drink some more scotch, motherfucker. It'll cheer you.
What? I gotta find more interviews with Bukowski. This is hilarious.
Enjoy yourself, man. Forget there's an interview. I like you as a person, by the way. My buddy.
All right, that was a good interview.
Even reading the great novelists of the past, I said, Tolstoy is supposed to be special. I go to bed, I read War and Peace. I read it, I say, where's the specialness in War and Peace? I really
I've never read War and Peace, but I've never heard anyone with that take. Every time I've heard somebody talk about War and Peace, I've heard it's like one of the greatest things ever. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about that
try
book.
to understand. I mean, and then many of the great poets of the past, I've read their stuff, I read it. All I get is a goddamn headache and boredom.
I agree. Sometimes I read poets that are like the best of the best, and I'm like it's not that good. Like these aren't really. And don't get me wrong, like a lot of people that are recognized as some of the best are that way for a reason, but there's a lot of people that I just don't get. It's the opposite of what he's talking about writing should be. Very descriptive. Yes and no. There's different styles. And like I wonder if Bukowski ever read Joyce, because what he's saying is kind of what Joyce was trying to do.
I really feel sickness in the pit of my stomach. I say, there's some trick going on here. This is not true. This is not real. It's not good. You see, poetry itself contains as much energy as a Hollywood industry, as much energy as a stage play on Broadway.
And if you've ever read a really good poem, oh, that's what War and Peace is. Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, Bukowski probably had a few too many beers when he was trying to read it, you know. That could really be it. But I mean, it's also like I feel like there's good books out there. There's like classics I know if I read I would hate. But does that make it a bad book? No. It just means I don't resonate with it. It's not something I'm interested in. It's not something I struggle with. It's just not something that I find any sort of inspiration in. You know what I mean? That's perfectly okay. And I feel like we live in a day and age where there's like no such thing as nuance. Like I can get why somebody likes something. I don't have to like it. You know what I mean? Whereas like somebody talks about a book and they're like, this is terrible because I didn't like it. It's just like that's such a weird way of seeing things. You know what I mean? I don't know how to say it aside from like it's weird how if you don't like something you immediately think it's bad. It doesn't mean it's bad, it just means you don't enjoy it. But there's people that have a diametrically opposed way of seeing the world that might eat it up. It's like
All it needs is practitioners who are alive to bring it alive. Poetry's always been said to be a private, hidden art, not appreciated. The reason it's not appreciated because it hasn't shown any guts, hasn't shown any dance, it hasn't shown any moxie. Poetry is generally very dull, very pretensive. Those who
I certainly agree with that because like there's a lot of poetry that you have to be a poet to enjoy. And I don't think that should be the case. You know, my favorite writings, my favorite way of writing myself, Moxie's the most Bukowski word ever. Yeah, for sure. But the things I really enjoy, the things that really inspire me, and the things that I really try to write myself is something that I could read and enjoy, and somebody that has zero interest in what I'm trying to say can read and enjoy. You know, what I'm trying to say is bring the ideas down to the level of a layman. Not necessarily somebody that's dumb, but somebody that's not in the world that I'm trying to explain. You know, I don't like when people hide their ideas. This is why I'm against mystery schools because they hide their ideas behind layers of initiation and this and that. It's like I got to put years and years and years to find out what you actually believe. It's like really, it's dumb. Tell me what you believe, and if I'm on board with that, then I'll join your group. Then I'll join your clan. Then I'll become part of what you're doing. But the fact that you're not revealing to me what you truly believe means that there's probably something you're trying to hide. And it's like, that's what I hate. I hate dishonesty. I hate hypocrisy. I hate when you try to elevate ideas instead of trying to bring them to the universal. And that's really why, like, when I see somebody teaching something, what I really find novel, what I really think is the sign of intelligence is when you can bring a complex idea into a simplistic term, when you can explain something to the highest level of intellectuals and the lowest level of people that are just trying to get into these ideas. I think that's the greatest exemplification of intellect that you can show. And I know I used that word wrong. That's how dumb I am.
Say the poet is a very private and
Example.
precious person. I don't agree with. Generally, he's just a dumb, fuddling asshole writing insecure lines that don't come through, believing he's immortal, waiting for his immortality, which never arrives, because the poor fucker just can't write. Most poets, hoets, carrots can't even write a simple line, like the dog walked down the street. Nothing should ever be.
Imagine what Charles Dickens would write. Like, Bukowski would do it in one line. It would take Charles Dickens 10 pages to write The Dog Went Down the Street. Do not call myself dumb. I'm intelligent and special. You mean special needs? No, I'm smart in certain ways, but I'm dumb in other ways. And I think it's useful to call yourself dumb because it's necessary to keep yourself humble. If I don't call myself dumb, then I'm going to fall victim to the trap of pride. I'm going to fall victim to the idea that I'm in some way better than somebody else because I know some niche topic that that person's not interested in. And I think that's where most smart people fall short. But I think it's important to reiterate that there's a lot of things I don't know, and there's a lot of things I'm really ignorant on. And the more I call myself dumb, the more I'm able to keep myself humble. And it's also important for me to reiterate this fact because I don't want even the smartest person in the world to believe that they're special. I don't want the smartest person in the world to believe that they're better than anyone else because they can think in a certain way. You know what I mean? Like we're all unique in our own ways. We all have our own talents in our own ways, and we all have the necessity to develop our talents in our own ways. Just because I might be, I studied Emerson more than other people, that doesn't mean I'm better. There's people that are more athletic than me. There's people that are better looking than me. There's people that are richer than me. Like I don't like comparisons, so I always need to like reiterate these facts because like I don't want you to watch my videos and go like, "Oh, this person's smart. I have to listen to everything they say." No, I don't want you to agree with everything I say. If you agree with everything I say, then you're just doing yourself a disservice. A good leader doesn't lead people. A good leader leads you to yourself. They show you who you are. They allow you to discover who you can become. But if I forever keep you stuck and you look at me and you believe everything I say and you try to be like me to the 100% degree and you emulate everything I do, every book I read, there's no point because you're becoming me, you're not becoming yourself. And you'll never be happy living as me just as I'll never be happy living as you. So I don't think it's a bad thing to call myself dumb. And we can even take this back to Socrates. We can even take this back to Plato's Apology, where essentially Socrates is deemed by the Oracle of Apollo or the Oracle of Delphi, same thing. But he's deemed the smartest man, and he's trying to disprove that he's the smartest man. So he goes to the poets and he speaks to the poets. He goes to the philosophers and he speaks to the philosophers. He goes to the government, the people that work in government and control people's lives and have so much influence over people. And what he realizes is that the only difference between him and them is that he knows what he doesn't know. And because he knows what he doesn't know, he keeps an open mind. And because he keeps an open mind, he's able to use his rational thinking capacity. He's able to question things. He's able to understand things. He's able to shift his perspective. And through doing this, he can usually come to the right answer. And it's in fact his humility that makes him so smart. And that's a lot of the reason why I call myself dumb, because it's if you don't call yourself dumb, if you rest on your laurels, if you think that you know the answer to everything because you've studied this, this, and this, then you close off the possibility to a new solution. And it's there's no such thing as absolute knowledge. There's no such thing as absolute understanding. Even the colors you see in front of you, it's not those colors aren't real. It's the atoms are vibrating at a certain frequency to give the appearance of color. Like our observation, our tools of observation, our organs of perception, as Blake would say, are not infinite. They're finite. And because of that, we're always limited. And it's necessary to accept your limitations so that you can be cognizant of them. And once you're cognizant of them, then you can see where they're leading you astray. I don't know if that was a useful tangent or an interesting tangent, but you're sorry you ever said anything? No, I mean I feel like that's an important point to make. And I feel like that's an important distinction to make. I'm not like I know you're joking, but like I don't know. I don't know what pulled that tangent out of me, but that's something I've been thinking about for a very long time. So thank you for giving me that statement to ramble
Be
on.
done that should be done. It has to come out like a good hot beer shit. A good hot beer shit is glorious, man. You get up, you turn around, you look at it, you're proud. The fumes, the stink of the turd, you look at them, you say, God, I did it, I'm good, you know. And you
I was not ready for that.
flush it away, and then there's a sense of sadness when just the water is there. It's like writing a good poem, you just do it. It's a beer shit. There's nothing to analyze, there's nothing to say, it's just done. Got it?
Weirdly enough, this is a pretty good analogy. Um, could he have found a less gross one for sure? But he got his point across. So
I really hate reading worse because you're really getting up there. You've written poems that you really meant alone, by your typewriter. And then there's this crowd out there drinking beer and all that, and you're reading it to them. It just doesn't click. The writer has no responsibility except to jack off in bed alone
I
and
I have no analysis to this. I could just laugh. I'm sorry.
type a good page. So really, why I continued writing, even though it came back and I got drunk for 10 years, I felt there was nothing out there. So I had to continue because they were so bad, not because
He's so funny. Like it's just something. There's something about him that's just so like.
I was so good. And I'm still not so good, but they're still very bad.
Alcoholism is not just. It's just not a thing to be thought about as much as it was even 15 years ago. Yeah, I mean, there's something. There's this weird like phenomena where like the rate of alcoholism has gone down immensely. Yeah, but I don't think it's for the better. Like I feel like the people that would become alcoholics are like now just like smoking weed or like doing harder drugs. Like you know what I mean? I don't know if drug usage as a whole has gone down. It's probably gone up. Or like the problem is like these people are taking drugs that are not going to be, like alcoholism will kill you over a long time, but like if you do like the drugs out now, it's like you don't have that much time. It's really sad to say. But I feel like there's this I mean Bukowski grew up during the Great Depression and like that generation kind of just like sucked it up and kind of just like did all they could to get through life. So you could definitely see this like influence on him. Like if, to me too, it seems like at least reading Ham on Rye, his childhood was very crazy and very rough. And it really makes sense why he has a lot of these beliefs because like I mean from a very young age he kind of didn't really get a fair shake. His dad took out his frustration on him, and that's like a really difficult thing for any kid to go through. And that makes you one of two ways. It makes you be the same person as your father, where you take it out on your child, or it makes you revolt and become a rebel like Bukowski and just reject everything. And it sucks because it's like, I mean, we got great writing, we got a funny video to react to, but like you could tell Bukowski's gone through some stuff. You could tell he experienced a lot of pain in his life.
There's still room for somebody to step in here, you see. And I hope he arrives, or she. That should be enough right there, with that bundle of 55 poets. That should cure them with their melody, but it won't. Good night, goodbye, and happy reading.
See if there's any other. This is the Crunch. He's reading a poem.
The crunch. Too much, too little. Too fat, too thin, or nobody. Laughter or tears. Haters, lovers. Strangers with faces like the backs of thumbtacks. Armies running through streets of blood.
So far, this has reminded me a lot of William Blake or Heraclitus Gibran.
Waving wine
Not in the same Heidi language, but
bottles. Bayoneting and fucking virgins. Or an old guy in a cheap room with a photograph of M. Monroe. There is a loneliness in this world so great that you can see it in the slow movement of the hands of a clock. People so tired.
and I feel like it's kind of sticking at this point. The way Bukowski tries to take the mundane experience and kind of analyze it. You know, I really do think that the closest example is like Walt Whitman. Back of this book describes it well. Where is it? Maybe it's not this book. Wordsworth, Whitman, William Carlos Williams, and the Beats in the respective generations moved poetry to a more natural language. Bukowski moved it a little farther. And what this is from the Los Angeles Times Book Review. And I think that's an interesting way of stating it because, you know, there is some story to life. There is something poetic about life. There is something profound about life. And it's through the observation of life that we can somewhat understand it and somewhat move forward and somewhat find something through it. And there's very few people that are able to make these sorts of observations in the way that Bukowski is, and it's just I mean, it's very hard to get me interested in such meaningless things.
Tired, mutilated, either by love or no love. People are just not good to each other, one on one. The rich are not good to the rich.
People are not good to each other one on one. Wow. That's such an interesting way of thinking about it because think of how many relationships fail where like outwardly these people seem like everything's going well, but when it's just that other person, like we've pretty much all been in bad relationships where like, we're not good to that other person, where that other person isn't good to us. And it's like that's supposedly the person you love the most in this world, and you can't even treat them better than you treat a stranger. Such a weird. There's always there's always something hard hitting about his
The
lines.
poor are not good to the poor. We are afraid. Our educational system tells us that we can all be big-ass winners. It hasn't told us about the gutters, or the suicides, or the terror of one person aching in one place alone, untouched.
The school system tells us we can all be winners, and it's a very brutal reality. It's a very like harrowing reality. But there's something so profound in that is that we're told if we follow the right steps, if we go to school, if we get an education, we'll get a good job and we'll be happy and we'll have everything that we need and life will be perfect. But the truth is, like, only a select few people that's going to work out for. Only a select few people are going to get the job that we all desire. And it's this weird idea of, we've all heard the saying of like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Well, why do we all go to the same colleges? Why do we all get the same degrees? Why do we all try to outwork each other, all try to make the best LinkedIn profile, the best resume, submit it to the exact same companies and expect us to get a better result? It's so it's so weird how we'll accept this reality about certain things, but we won't accept it about our everyday actions and the world as a whole is the way that most people approach it.
Unspoken to watering a plant. People are not good to each other. People are not good to each other. People are not good to each other. I suppose they never will be. I didn't ask them to.
I mean, people are not even good to themselves. And that's really the sad reality of it is that, most people hate themselves so much and expect to be a good person. But really the path to a better world is figuring out yourself, figuring out your own issues, figuring out the things you struggle with, figuring out how to make your own life a little bit more bearable so that you can take on the pain of somebody else. If you're in a relationship with somebody, how do you expect the relationship to work out if that person has baggage and you have baggage and you're both putting that baggage onto each other and your problems are just multiplying because you have two people that are messed up that are trying to create something beautiful. You can't build a house on shaky foundation, and unfortunately most relationships are built on shaky foundations because people haven't even figured out how to give love to themselves, let alone somebody else. It's a very it's a very weird phenomena.
To be. But sometimes I think about it. The beads will swing, the clouds will cloud, and the killer will behead the child, like taking a bite out of an ice cream cone. Too much, too little, too fat, too thin or nobody, more haters than lovers. People are not good to each other.
I also appreciate he's not rhyming because I don't know. To me, like I feel like this need to rhyme in poetry is like it's beneficial in some ways. It shows um craftiness and structure, and you know it's good, but I don't think every poem needs to rhyme, and I appreciate the way Bukowski writes because it doesn't follow a format, it just follows his thoughts.
Perhaps if they were, our deaths would not be so sad. Meanwhile, I look at young girls, stems, flowers of chance. There must be a way. Surely there must be a way we have not yet thought of. Who put this brain inside of me? It cries, it demands. It says there is a chance. It will not say no.
All right, so I feel like we've gone through enough Bukowski. Um, Here's some poems that I guess we could read. Let's see how long these are. Is Bukowski even good or what? What do you mean, is he good? I mean, I feel like good's a relative term. I enjoy him, but is he William Blake? No. But, you know, it's up to interpretation. I like Post Office is really good, and then this book's really good too. I mean, in terms of poetry, it's again, it's all subjective. 8 count from my bed, I watch three birds on a telephone wire. One flies off, then another, one is left, then it too is gone. My typewriter is tombstone still, and I am reduced to bird watching. Just thought I'd let you know. It's pretty funny. All right, that's a perfect way to end our talk on Bukowski. We'll go into Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer's interesting because, like, I feel like he's. I hope this doesn't show any ads. If this starts showing ads, I'm gonna have to switch to my other account that's ad free. But
is remarkable for holding views which are designed to make people uncomfortable, to drive them out of their complacency. And while he may be successful in driving us out of our complacency, there's a sort of bitterness and acerbic quality to his writing, which is
well, this is my other account. I was like, why am I not subscribed to this?
not like other 19th century optimistic romantic writers. So when you open Schopenhauer for the first time, be prepared for something of a shock. He does not write like a typical German philosopher.
I like the way Schopenhauer writes though.
He has a very sprightly style, which contrasts very powerfully with the rather dour and unpleasant and pessimistic content. I would compare him to Nietzsche if you're looking for
That's probably the best comparison. If you read early Nietzsche, you read Schopenhauer, I don't see the difference. Um, you could really see early on that Nietzsche was heavily influenced by Schopenhauer. It seems like almost that he's trying to be Schopenhauer. He even somewhat admits that, and then tries to outdo Schopenhauer later in his career with The Will to Power, which I think is the same as The Will to Live, but that's just my take
a
on it.
comparable poet philosopher in the German language. And I am inclined to think that although he's not generally read as a choice in the canon right now, he is worth reading because he is so influential on people like Freud or Wittgenstein.
If you read the interpretations of dreams, I think it's Goethe and Schopenhauer the most cited people in that work. And a lot of what Freud talks about, you can just take as Schopenhauer's philosophy. Like a lot of the will to live is really analogous to Freud's psychosexual theory.
Or Nietzsche later on in the 19th century and the early 20th century. Now, with most philosophers, I'm inclined to shy away from family background. I think, for example, when you study Kant, it's pretty much not important to know what his personal life was like. It doesn't tell you very much about the Kantian Ding an sich. It doesn't tell you very much about his philosophy. That is not the case with Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer's family background has a lot to do with his psychic makeup and with
I know a little bit about it. I don't know too much. I know that his dad was like really rich and he died when Schopenhauer was young, and it basically meant that Schopenhauer didn't have to work. So like he had like an inheritance to kind of live on, and then he got into philosophy, then he became a professor.
the stance he takes towards the world, the sort of characteristic postures of his philosophy. In the first case, his father committed suicide. And this is the kind of thing that generally will have an extremely negative effect on the psyche, a kind of permanent damage, or at least long-term lasting damage, a very negative view towards the world. And it seems to me this carries over into Schopenhauer's work. I mean, it's unmistakable. The second important fact, in addition to his father's suicide, is the fact that his mother, who survived the father, was extremely cold and distant and threw him out of the house, eventually broke with him. So in other words, he is at sea in the social world. He has no familial contacts. He is almost perfectly lonely. And in addition to being almost perfectly lonely, it is hard to imagine a man that wallows in his own unhappiness to a greater extent than Schopenhauer.
If that isn't the perfect way to describe Schopenhauer, it's hard to imagine a man that wallows in his unhappiness more than Schopenhauer. I think that's the perfect way of describing him.
And he has performed the unusual service of offering to share his unhappiness with us. This willingness to share is perhaps Schopenhauer's sole gentle gesture towards the rest of humanity. And if you keep in mind his background and the persistent and continuing negativity of his personal life, I think it will inform your reading of his philosophical works. This is one of those cases where it is not possible to separate the man and the philosophy. I am not sure if this should be called a philosophy. I don't quite know what to call it.
It like borders on the easiest way to describe Schopenhauer is that he's closer to a mystic than a philosopher. Um, that's why there's a lot of carryover with Nietzsche and somewhat mysticism. But essentially Schopenhauer, I think he read the Gita, and then he read I have it, it's back there. It's like the Upanishads or something like that. It's the other book that the Gita is a part of. Dude, he is like, if Schopenhauer was alive today, dude, like he would be like a Discord mod or something. There there's something so there's parts of Schopenhauer that I find interesting, and there's parts of him just like, what do you like, what is wrong with you, man? It's like it's so funny. But he was really inspired by Eastern philosophy and Eastern mysticism, and he tries to somewhat create a philosophical system based off of this.
So for the purposes of discussion, let's consider it the metaphysics from hell.
Do you realize how
Fair
much
enough.
money?
All right, wait. Hold on, let me.
When you open Schopenhauer for the first time,
Why?
be prepared for something of a shock. He does not write
How far were we?
towards the rest of humanity. And if you keep in mind his background and the reading are the great idealists, particularly Plato and Kant. Kant in particular of his philosophical works. This is one of those cases where it is not possible to separate the man and the philosophy. I am not sure if this should be called a philosophy. I don't quite know what to call it. So for the purposes of discussion, let's consider it the metaphysics from hell. Now, what are we talking about? What is Schopenhauer involved with? Well, his background is quite intriguing. He's a consistent reader. He reads a great many kinds of texts. And his...
Dude, Schopenhauer is just like This guy or Schopenhauer? Because I feel like they're both pretty funny. Like I, when you're reading Schopenhauer, one minute you're like, this guy's on to something, and then next minute you're like, what are you trying to say? Like it's just, it's so funny.
His most important influences in terms of his philosophical reading are the great idealists, particularly Plato and Kant. Kant in particular is very important for Schopenhauer. There are elements in his philosophy which are borrowed directly from Kant, where
And the world as will and representation. That's like that's seen as Schopenhauer's magnum opus. Um, it really centers around two ideas. The first is the will to live, which is essentially, God, this is very hard to describe. I haven't read it in so long. Human beings are driven by their will to live. So, like, the need to preserve your own life. So, think of preserving your own life as survival and reproduction. Um, and that many of us make decisions based off of this will to live that are contrary to our own best interests. And Schopenhauer sees it as a negative force that pulls humanity in certain directions. It's the explanation for war, it's the explanation for people hoarding resources, people doing things that aren't righteous, that aren't good. Um, I can't remember if he takes it in that same way, but that's my interpretation of it. And then the world as representations is the Platonic idea of forms. What you see is just a model of what actually is. I said this, Viva Puerto Rico. Where is this? Like, I'm so confused where this joke is coming from. I mean, I'm fine. It's not, I don't have anything against Puerto Rico, so I'm just confused where, I think, like, where'd you get this from? Or is this just like, is this just gonna be a running joke? Um, the Platonic idea of form is very simple that what you see is not exactly what there is. That there's forces. We can't observe gravity, we can't observe magnetic fields, we can't observe how atoms interact with each other, and what we see is limited. Think of Blake's quote that man Blake's quote doesn't ignore what I just said. Blake's quote really is not that
he
important.
says, rather than reinvent the wheel, I will accept the Kantian view here and then move on and invert the Kantian view with regard to other matters. So the legacy of Kant is the most important for Schopenhauer, as it is for all early 19th century German philosophers. In addition to Kant, what's unique about Schopenhauer is that he is one of the first European intellectuals to begin reading an Indian religion. Here I'm talking about subcontinental India. And in particular, Schopenhauer spent a good deal of time reading the Upanishads.
I do have that book. It's back there. I've read the Gita, but I have not read the Upanishads. That's how you say it, I guess. And if you're familiar with Ralph Waldo Emerson, if you're familiar with Henry David Thoreau, they were both really inspired by the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita.
And although I hadn't noticed direct references to it, I believe that he'd been reading some of the works of the Buddha. There is a certain sort of emphasis on Indian mysticism, but in addition, a sort of negative evaluation of the human world, creating desire as a problem to be solved, establishing.
That doesn't necessarily, okay, there's this, I don't know, okay, I don't know if this is controversial to say, but I read this somewhere and there's like some speculation that like Buddhism or Taoism is the Indian mysticism with the deity stripped, which makes a lot of sense to me because there's a lot of carryover.
The personality as a challenge to be overcome rather than merely a boundary to human experience. So Schopenhauer has a powerful strain of Indian Eastern pessimism that I think.
This is the first time I've seen Vino stop himself from going on a tangent. Well, it's just the tangent made no sense with what I was trying to say. It was like, what point am I trying to prove? Oh, wait, this is a completely different point. I mean, basically, the Blake quote is that man doesn't see things for how they are. He is bounded by his sight, his touch, his senses, and because he's bounded by his senses and he doesn't give credit to the infinite, then he doesn't see the infinite. But that has zero relation to the point I was trying to prove.
Is
But
a
yes, you're right.
combination of
That's the first time I've stopped one of my tangents.
Hinduism and Buddhism. Connected with that, we have a weird combination to the tradition of German idealism. He's saturated in Kant, and while he was at university, he heard the lectures of Fichte and Schleiermacher. So he is very
Those don't sound like real names. It's so funny.
much part of the tradition of German idealism. The difficulty lies in the fact that he's going to take that idealist tradition
Schopenhauer also worked with Goethe while he's very young as well. He actually helped him come up with his theory of colors.
and to a great extent stand it on its head. Schopenhauer, in some respects, is a one-trick pony. The one trick that he knows, he does all the time, and he's real good at it. He takes a philosopher and perhaps borrows some elements of it, keeps them the same, and thereafter he stands the philosophy on its head. So what Schopenhauer knows how to do is invert.
You could see why this influenced Nietzsche so well, because Schopenhauer is easily able to destroy other philosophies, but doesn't really create his own, I guess you could say.
Prior philosophies in unique and rather disturbing ways, in ways you wouldn't have thought a sane man could think. And the results are quite surprising and sometimes intriguing, if perhaps off-putting at the same time.
I love the way he says, because it's so
A couple
true.
of observations. First off, in his essays, which are in some ways the most accessible part of his work, they are hard to read nowadays, particularly in late 20th century America. The persistent misogyny, the racism, repulsive characteristics of this, he makes no bones about. Schopenhauer is, in that respect, an anachronism. I would like to send you, if you were going to read this, I would like to send you to some text. I am not sure that there is any text that would not be offensive, and justifiably so. But if you want to have an access...
I hate how he keeps doing that. Schopenhauer's hilarious because he'll say something really smart and then say something really stupid at like the exact same moment. And it's like, I don't know, it's sometimes hard to not throw the baby out with the bathwater with him. And like the funniest part about him is like there's like the famous like speech he has on women. It's not a speech, it's part of I don't know if it's a separate essay, but like he said, I'm not even gonna say it because I don't want it's not even like I don't even want to repeat what he says. But like Schopenhauer had a dog, and the boys in the neighborhood would refer to her as Mrs. Schopenhauer. So this just shows you like the the person we're talking about. So it's like clearly this is somebody that's not gonna have the right opinions of people. You know, it's so funny. Yeah, I read on women, yeah. I mean, I didn't really like read it in depth because it was like he's to me he was like somewhat characterizing like the archetype of women at the time and not really I mean, it's even like if you read most of like older fiction, it's like they don't really give that good of a take on women in general. Like they're very static characters. And the only one that I've seen that's able to kind of have very compelling female characters is Chaucer. Chaucer, some of the best written female characters I've ever read. Joyce as well too. Joyce, like Molly Bloom, is one of the best female characters I've ever read. But like Schopenhauer doesn't even try to understand women. It's so funny.
To Schopenhauer, I would say start with the essays. His great work, and there's only one great work that Schopenhauer produced, is rather intimidating. And if you find you like the essays, then perhaps you'd want to go on. But I wouldn't start with Schopenhauer's main work, which is called The World as Will and Idea, another ponderous German title for a great big book that...
There's the most common, let me get it real quick. This is the most common thing you'll see by Schopenhauer, and it's not that long. It's 300 pages, and it's an excerpt from it. It's not the whole thing. I don't know how long the whole thing is. It's probably like 800 pages, 1,000 pages maybe. But this does a pretty good job of um giving you what Schopenhauer has to say. But that's the most, if you go to like a Barnes and Nobles or if you go online, that'll be the first book that comes up if you're looking for it in English. That's like the most popular version. That's what I've seen the most.
Takes the tradition of German idealism and inverts some of the main ideas. And in particular, Schopenhauer has a definite animus towards Hegel. They are roughly contemporary.
He hates Hegel, and it's so funny because Schopenhauer was he would hold lectures and Hegel's lectures would be right next to him, and Hegel's lectures would be full, and nobody would come to Schopenhauer's lectures.
And while Schopenhauer and Hegel were both at the University of Berlin,
Oh,
Hegel, of course, was at the
yeah.
apogee of his career, one of the most celebrated intellectuals in the Western world, and Schopenhauer was Schopenhauer, which means that he was not going to get a wide following. Schopenhauer was arrogant and anti-Hegelian to the point of a sort of mania, decided to schedule his lectures. He could schedule them at any time he wished. He scheduled them directly against the lectures of Hegel. And Hegel, of course, got hundreds of students to sign up for his lectures, and Schopenhauer got a few the first day, and thereafter got none. So
That's so funny. Can you imagine Schopenhauer as a professor? It's like that, oh, what's a good example of this? I'm trying to remember. What was this show? When I was little, there was like a episode of The Big Bang Theory. I was 10. Don't judge me. There's an episode where Sheldon is like a professor and everyone quits. That's exactly how I imagined Schopenhauer's lecture was. Like he was expecting the world of these people, and they're just like, dude, this is like an entry level course. I'm not doing all this work for this. Like,
as a result, he left the university because, as most intellectuals think, no one understood him. And people did not realize that he was far and away Hegel's superior, and that just shows how benighted and wicked they are. Keep that in mind.
this is so funny.
Many frustrated intellectuals feel this way. It is remarkable how bitter and acerbic he can be. If you look in some of the essays, there's a wonderful line, and I mean, it's stuck in my brain since I read it in college. He said, I wish to apologize to the reader of the future for mentioning Hegel, a philosopher you have never heard of. Oh, which is an incredibly harsh thing to say, but it tells you all you need to know about Schopenhauer. Right? It gives you...
That's so funny because I feel like Schopenhauer really did influence. I mean, I guess you say Freud, but like most people don't really. Most people that know Freud don't really even know enough about Freud to know Schopenhauer influenced him, let alone know who Schopenhauer is. And even Nietzsche, like Nietzsche praised Schopenhauer early on, and then all but denounced him later on. It's like, meanwhile, Hegel's like one of the main influences on Marx, along with Epicurus. It seems like Hegel is more important now than ever because there's this we're seeing the Hegelian dialectic play out in real time. People be fooled by this left-right divide, and it's just so apparent. Um, let me take a break real quick. I'll be back in a second. I love how this guy's like talking about Schopenhauer, but like half of what he's saying, he's just making fun of him. It's like, I think it's the perfect way to approach this.
The attitude, and in some respects, the style is much more important than the substance here. And alas, we have heard of Hegel, and that tells you even more about Schopenhauer. Now, his great work is called The World as Will and Idea, published it as a young man in 1818. And it's a remarkable piece of work because it is such a musical construction. He is a highly aesthetic man. One of the perhaps disturbing or discordant things about the history of philosophy is that it is often the case that people with wonderfully artistic styles who have great literary creativity are often neither edifying nor moral. In other words, it is possible to be a very bad man or to say some really unpleasant or offensive things, but to say them in a very elegant way. I direct you to Nietzsche. It is certainly possible.
It's so funny that there's such a comparison between the two, and there's like to me it's hard to sometimes distinguish them. Um, that's gonna piss a lot of people off, but like I don't really care as much of the differences between people as the similarities. Like the little distinctions, the little semantic differences, like that's not as interesting to me as comparing people and seeing what they have in common.
So what we should notice here is that he's got a wonderful style, and he's a German philosopher, which is amazing, because how many German philosophers have wonderful styles? And at the same time, the content of what he is saying is often quite unpleasant, often quite off-putting. The four parts of the world of the world as will and idea were described by Thomas Mann as a symphony in four movements. And that is a beautiful and very acute way of describing it. It is sort of verbal music, has a high poetic content, and is certainly very pleasant if you don't stop to think about what he's telling you. The idea of the world and will, or the concept behind the world and will as will and idea is basically this. He is making the distinction, characteristic of German philosophy, between subject and object,
What you see versus what really is.
which also corresponds to the distinction between noumena and phenomena. He's obviously borrowing from Kant here. And he's going to take parts of that and then invert other parts to come up with a new metaphysics of his own. And what he's trying to do is is first of all, formulate the problem of the self. What is it like to be a self-conscious entity in this world? And after formulating this problem, he's going to show us that it has the deepest spiritual implications. So he's going to formulate a powerful spiritual problem, something analogous to that of Kierkegaard. And then he's going to tell us, unlike Kierkegaard, that this problem has no solution. And that this is the human condition. So, like Hamlet, Schopenhauer is trapped in an egoistic prison called the world. And what he's going to do is share with us, right?
And this is where you see the analogies between Schopenhauer and Eastern mysticism. You know, Buddha said all suffering comes from desire. And Schopenhauer believed that desire was something fundamental to humanity, and we're in this endless cycle of wanting things and seeking things and always falling short and always wanting more. And there's a certain reality of pain to life, and there's a certain reality of sadness and not getting what you want out of life.
News of what this prison is like, because he seems to have discerned its perimeter. Like Kierkegaard, you could say that this is a relentless sort of negativity. Unlike Kierkegaard, this is a sort of sinfulness without redemption, which is perhaps the worst of all human conditions. First part is
Sinfulness without redemption. That sounds so awful.
the world as representation. The German word for it is Vorstellung. What that means is the world as idea. And in order to explain this to you, I'm going to have to drop back a little bit and talk about the philosophy of mind. In looking over the human Kant lectures, I found that we just didn't have time to cover the philosophy of mind, which is so important and pregnant with implications for later philosophical developments. You can't understand what Schopenhauer is doing unless you understand the Kantian philosophy of mind. And you can't understand that unless I tell you a little bit about Hume. Let's start from the beginning then. For Hume and the British empiricists,
I know the name, I just don't know.
the mind is what they call a tabula rasa, means a blank slate. Another way of thinking about it would be that the mind is an empty box. A baby gets born and starts to see and hear and touch.
I feel like we all know that's true and not true at the same time. Um, I don't know. We talk about young all the time, where you're born with somewhat of a collective unconscious. You're born with some sort of set beliefs based off of the culture and the society that you are born in, and you're also born with certain things just because you're a human being. Think of things that are very universal: the fear of snakes, the fear of spiders. There's no such thing as, well, there are snakes and spiders where I live, but why are we afraid of them from birth? It's because they're somewhat dangerous to us. They're somewhat a hereditary passing down of this information, of this knowledge.
taste, and since
There's also a lot of programmability in human beings as well. I think a lot of these like concepts, when people make these grand statements, it's like yes and, or in some ways yes, in other ways not. I think it's very difficult to make these generalizations about people as a whole or the world as a whole, because we keep coming back to the Latin proverb, there is no rule without an exception. There is no law that you can create that doesn't have some sort of loophole. And I really urge you to think of one, because I haven't found one yet.
sensations come into that empty box. And then the mind, in its activity of kind of making these sensations coherent, bundles them together. So if I were to look at this podium, for example, I would
Hey, Bino, I'm hungry. Do you mind if I step away for 6 minutes? Yes, I do mind. I can't believe you would even suggest. How dare you? No, you have to be here for every single moment of my stream, or else I hate you. Dude, of course. Why would you even have to ask? Just leave whenever. It's fine. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna keep going because I'm hungry myself, but why why even ask, man? It's fine. You're making it look like I keep everyone here at gunpoint, all like two or three of you.
I would see that it's hard, that it has a certain degree of weight, that it's smooth, that it's brown. And what I do is I bundle these sensations together to form the thing called the podium. It makes a
Like
certain
to
amount of sense.
apologize. I do not forgive you. I will remember this until my last day. You are now my enemy, friend.
Now, the problem that Hume ran into is that although we see tables and chairs and people and floors and ceilings, we never see certain things which we think of are important parts of the world. For example, Hume will tell us that you never see time, you never see space, you never see causality. And obviously that's true. If I were to drop this pen, take a pen and drop it, well, we see the causal relation. We see me pick the pen up, let it go, and it falls. And if I do that 100 times, we'll see it fall every time. Hume's point will be, though, although we see the event of me holding the pen up and the pen falling, we never see causality. All we see is a regularity between the two. Similarly, if you look around for time, you're going to look a long time. You may look at clocks, you may look at
Okay, this is an interesting sort of observation, is that the things that we think are concepts that are so easy to understand, they're not really practical and actual observation, because how can we define time? You know, we really don't exist in anything except the moment, and we can only observe time by looking to the past. But it really doesn't exist because in this moment is all we can observe. So in this instant, it's I don't know how to describe it aside from it's not real, but it is.
calendars, but all you're going to see are pieces of paper and mechanisms. You're not going to see time. So what Hume decides is that it's not there. It's a sort of imaginary thing, the way we glue the universe together. And Kant rejects this kind of skepticism. In other words, we have a problem here. We don't know how it is we found out about space and time and causality and being and negation and number and all the things which empiricism really lacks a good, coherent account for. Kant takes up that challenge. What Kant does is says, no, David Hume, you are wrong. In fact, the human mind is not a blank slate. It is not a tabula rasa. In fact, the human mind doesn't passively absorb sensation. Rather, it actively constructs the external world. And when you miss that activity of the human mind in constructing the external world, you cause yourself all kinds of philosophical paradoxes.
Here, that's a very interesting way of explaining that. And what he's saying is, we'll use the Robert Anton Wilson phrase, what the thinker thinks the prover proves. What you observe about the world will then shade your observation about the world. So, like, think of how somebody raised in a certain environment can believe a certain thing, no matter how crazy it is. It's because they were raised in that certain way. They construct the world around them. They construct the world around their own psyche, their own consciousness.
It's a brilliant answer. See if I can explain it. For Kant, think of the human mind as being a room, like this room, and say that the room has one window, and only one window. And you never, and the doors are locked, you're never going to get outside this room. That's the human mind itself. Now, when you look at the external world, when you observe and experience external reality, it looks to you like external reality is shaped exactly like the window. Of course it is, well, because that's your only access to it. Literally speaking, the shape of the window, as far as you're concerned, is the shape of what's outside the window. In other words, the light that comes in is precisely shaped by the opening that lets it in. In other words, there's a form that the mind imposes on external experience.
So again, the way I like to think about this is what we see is not really exactly the truth. The lights, the colors, the appearance of things. We can't see everything that's affecting us. We can't see gravity. We can't see magnetic fields. Well, unless you're a bird. If you're a bird in the chat, you can see magnetic fields. But there's things that are operating right in front of us that we are unaware of because our sight doesn't pick it up. But yet the majority of people don't even begin to consider these things because it's not apparent in front of them. And that there's this difference between reality and what we can observe.
And this activity of imposing these forms
Yeah, it's Plato's cave allegory. Again.
is a far better, more accurate, truer representation of human cognition. So instead of being a blank slate or an empty box, it's actually actively constructing the external world. Let me give you an example from the podium. I experience the podium, for example, as being both spatial and temporal. It exists in time, right? It was here when I started the lecture, and it'll be here when I finish, with any luck. And it takes up a certain space. If I walk into that space, I'm going to hit the podium. Now, what Kant says is that the mind contains, I believe it's 12, a priori forms of human cognition. A priori means that it's prior to our experience of the world. In other words, it's built in to experiencing the world as a human subject. And these
However stupid simulation theory is, think of it that way. It's that's the easiest analogy to what he's saying.
priori forms necessarily shape the way we experience the external world. So Kant says that the external world is composed of Dingen an sich. What that means is that things in themselves. So there are podiums, there are cups of coffee, there are pieces of paper, there are people, and there are objects in the world. But we can never experience these objects in an unmediated way, the way Hume assumes. Actually, we actively construct these objects by imposing on them categories we can't avoid.
Think of when you talk to somebody and you find out they have a belief about them, like they hold a belief that you hate. They have an opposite belief and it gives you a strong reaction, and you immediately think about that person differently. Or they say something really offensive to you and you no longer see them the same way. That's the easiest way to describe what he's speaking about, is that in some way our senses construct the world around us, and in some way you'll never see that person the same. Um, a friend that let you down, before they let you down, you love talking to them. You saw them in a certain way, but then you saw their real colors when they betrayed you. It's a very easy way of visualizing this.
Void. Space, time, causality, number, being, negation, and this is built into experiencing the world as a subject. This thousands of pages of philosophy are encapsulated in a line from T.S. Eliot in the Four Quartets, where he says, he's in the rose garden, he says, "The roses had the look of flowers that are looked at." Isn't that beautiful? That just gets it all together. Well,
This is something Freud said. It was basically poets have a deeper understanding of the psyche of reality than anyone else, and that everything that he described, poets understood for centuries, if not millennia, before him. I think that's one of the most honest things Freud ever said. The rest of it's not that honest, but
Well, the podium has the look of a podium that is looked at. It's not like this in and of itself. We can't find out what the podium is in and of itself. We have to experience the world through space, time, causality, through these necessary forms. That's why we all know what space is, but nobody can explain it to you. Right? If somebody really said they didn't know what quantity was, what would we do? We all know what quantity is, we just can't explain it. It's built right into the hard wiring of the human psyche. It's a deep answer, a very important answer. And this is what Schopenhauer takes as his foundation. In other words, the first movement of the world as idea, the world as Vorstellung, the world as representation. In other words, he's saying that the external world is what Kant says it is. It's one big idea. So we have all these overlapping.
so the world we see is not exactly what the world is what you should take away from this. And where does this where does this leave us? What does this mean? What can we understand about this? And I think I don't really remember what Schopenhauer says about this, but the most interesting aspect of this is that this is why people are so different. This is why people are able to have such vastly different ideas. It's because your bias, your lens, the way in which you see the world shapes the world. And then Robert Anton Wilson has What the Thinker Thinks, the Prover Proves. And think about it this way. If something goes wrong and you're a Christian, you're a Bible thumper, when something goes wrong, it's the work of the devil. There's some force that's acting on you. There's some force that's trying to capture your soul and turn you to the dark side and all these performative sayings. And then if you are agnostic or an atheist or you don't really give credit to the devil, then it's just pure chance or just things went wrong. Or, if you're someone that follows Neville Goddard, then you believe that in some way you constructed this reality to teach yourself a lesson. Um, however you view the world is going to shape how things occur to you. It's been 9 minutes. I will never forgive you. You said six and and now it's nine. Can't believe you. No, you're fine. I feel like I'm gonna end this because I'm starting to get tired anyway. Um, I also have to start reading it's only like 20, 30 pages, but I want to start reading the assigned reading for this week as well. I'm not sure if you saw the um post I did. 'Cause I did two members only post to just remind you, but it's this Sand and Foam by Khalil Gibran. Um, I'll type it real quick so you remember. That is it's one of my favorite works ever, and that's what we're gonna go over on Sunday. Um, no rush if you're busy or you can't make it, but okay. All right. Good that you got it. Um, but I think I'm gonna end this. I really don't want to talk about Schopenhauer for another hour because that's how long it's gonna take me to get through this. It's gonna take me longer, but yeah, thank you guys for making it to the stream. I had a good time. Um, I don't know if I'm gonna stream tomorrow. I might just do the one on my phone. Um, but yeah, I got a good video for you guys tomorrow. I had fun filming it. Um, but reminds you of the Rubaya. What is that? Remind me to read that at some point. But yeah, with that said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. Have a good rest of your Friday.